Now, I'm at that point in my preparations for the upcoming season where, thanks to all the content I've did in the member section and a lot of the stuff that we've done on the channel already, like looking back at the results that I had over last season and try and set some goals ahead, I'm now looking at, the philosophy I've got here at FC Barcelona. And it's something I always kind of do subconsciously, but it's something that I've kind of brought up to the surface and I'm kind of examining out there so that we can put it under the microscope and examine exactly how I think about my club coming into this season and if there's anything in it that maybe a wee bit of food for thought for yourself. Maybe it's a giggle. If you do, laugh, you learn, or like something or whatever, hit the like button. But ultimately, I think your club philosophy is really the foundation. It's like the framework that will always help guide you in, what leagues you're going to be playing, what decisions you'll make. And when I think about the philosophy for my club, there's three main sections that we'll drop in the video today. We'll have on-pitch philosophy, so it's the sort of players and that kind of thing we're after, transfer policy, and our competitive philosophy as well. So three very different aspects of the game that, you're always going to have different parameters for and different objectives within. And it's very important, I think, the more things you've got clarity on with your Sorare Club, FC Barcelona, whatever yours is called, the more fun you can have with it. You can actually progress, you can actually achieve things, you can actually win things off the leaderboards and everything else in between, of course, So I had a lot of fun drafting this, I had a lot of fun scripting it out, and I'm sure we're going to have a great time in the video today. Now, I've already said it, but we are trying to get to 10,000 subscribers before the beginning of the new season. So at any point in the video, if you haven't already, please do subscribe to the channel. It really means a lot. We're growing every week and every day at the moment at a great rate, which is phenomenal. And we couldn't do that without your support. I'm really glad everyone's enjoying the content. Fist bumps to you. And I love interacting with all you guys in the comment section. By the way, the comment section has been on fire over the last month or so. It's been fantastic. But let's just get stuck into it. Now, I think I'll start with on-pitch philosophy because that's the fun element. That is wholeheartedly where, like from a football fan's perspective, you always want the club to get the best players, to put the best team out possible. And I'm no different as a fan of my club, as the chairman of my club. I can actually act on that, which is great fun. And the first thing that I would say is a firm philosophy. Some of the things in the video today are always up for revisiting and whatever. But some of these things, particularly the playing dynamic, it's just a bit of fun as much as anything. But a very firm element of the club philosophy here at FC Barcelona is I have always had a Polish goalkeeper. I've had Titon, Jacob Slowik, a couple of versions of him, and Matthias Liss, and obviously currently at the club, Lucas Skorupski. So over the last 3 or 4 seasons, I've always had a super rare, or at least a Polish goalkeeper of some description representing FC Barcelona. And I'm a big fan of Artur Boric. Unfortunately, that's just never crossed over in that sense. But I love the fact that just by kind of chance as well, I've kind of leaned into it now with Skorupski because I do really like Skorupski, and that made me go for him a little bit extra, because I realised, I've not had a Polish goalkeeper in a while. Matthias Liss didn't really work out the way I'd expected them to. So that's the first one. I really like CFG talent. I really like the guys that Man City sign that don't quite make it for Man City, but they get loaned out to Holland and to Spain and to Belgium and Austria and all these different places. And I can try and pick them up before they break into these little teams and, maybe trade them in the market. I had some great success with that previously, with most notably probably Taylor, Harwood, Bellis, but even some of them that I'll keep and bank into my gallery for when they do come good. And this one obviously isn't as young, but Enes Ünal was a big part of that. Was how I discovered him. That was how I identified him, was it was a CFG kind of, for lack of a better term, cast-off. So because I'm a Man City fan, and until this season, Man City were not on the table, I couldn't buy any cards. That was the closest I could get to the club. So I do have a firm contingent, like I've got about 40 or 50 cards of guys that were owned by City, but maybe didn't always do much. And they cover the length and breadth for Europe, lots of different profiles and styles. I'm really happy with the collection I've got there. I probably now don't need to add to that anymore. So as far as the club philosophy goes, I can maybe try and really narrow in and try and get some Man City actual representation through this season. I watch a lot of Celtic. I watch actually less and less as time has been on Sorare or MLS in New York City, but I do watch a lot of New York City when it comes to MLS, and I watch a lot of Red Bull. So naturally, I'm always going to have some guys that I know I'm going to come out of those teams. And because of the way Sorare's went, the philosophy really has been maximize number one out of that list, which is Celtic, and make sure I can get the best Celtic collection possible. And then NYC, because it was a historic MLS Cup win in the season, you know, the wee star on the badge and all that good stuff. That was just an extra special season. I really like prospects. I really like up-and-coming guys. Now, I've kind of mentioned some of the profiles and some of the locations that I will kind of, you know, draw my scouting from, will kind of tap my club into real-world football with, if that makes sense. But no matter who I pick up, it could be somebody that's totally disconnected from all these other things. It could be a guy that I just watch one time and I think, oh, I really like a little bit of what that guy does. Brais Mendes and formerly Denis Suarez, they were probably those types of guys a little bit for me as well, where it didn't really matter that they didn't fit into anything perfectly. I was just really excited to get those guys in, and I'd been watching them and I thought I can get some great scores out of this pair. And Brais has went on to be very successful at the club. Denis obviously wasn't as successful, but I think he could be good next year. But no matter what the age, I always have to have something with them where I mentioned it on some content recently, but the player has to have some sort of horizon. You know, I like to have players that have a bit of a upward trajectory, but I don't mind guys that don't have the ceiling. I don't mind backing talent. You know, I've got a lot of guys in my gallery, a lot of guys in my club that I just believe are capable of much more than what they've currently done. Maybe got a few too many of those guys, but I love having them because eventually enough of them do happen. You know, if you watch enough football and you can't pick out a good player from a crowd, if you get me, then, you know, that's a lot of fun. And that's been a big part of the playing philosophy, the guys I do pick, which can let me down on the leaderboard. And those guys can maybe more help me in the market rather than the leaderboard. But yeah, that's a big part of the philosophy of my club is, you know, if you believe in a guy, I don't mind taking the risk on them. I don't mind playing them. I don't mind buying them and holding them and waiting for them to become good if I think that they can. And when it comes to actual SO5, my ideal formation is I prefer to go double forward. You know, I like to try and chase decisives. I like to chase action goals, attacking football. And if I do need to go for a double midfielder, because I'm not going to play double defender unless I absolutely have to, although that's probably suboptimal in a lot of cases, you might argue. Then we want to be packing some big heavy hitters. I'm a big fan of XP, big fan of collection bonus now as well, but I love guys that can do everything. Tackle, shoot, get box to box, touch every blade of grass, pass to every player, tackle every opponent. Those are the sort of midfielders that I always like to try and build in so that, yeah, if I'm not playing double forward, I've not got guys that are hot, scoring goals, getting decisives, making a bit of AA for themselves. Then if I have to call upon midfielders, and I want them to be capable of anything, because in football, you can't always predict that you're going to get great fixtures all lining up, particularly when you've got players from different squads everywhere. But particularly, for me anyway, when I think about this midfield and my on-pitch philosophy, I want guys that are as immune to fixtures as possible, you know, and you get some midfielders that really fall into that category. If it's a more of a defensive game, they'll catch some more tackles and interceptions, and if they're in a bit more of a dominant position, then we'll get a couple more shots, maybe they'll get their goal, you know. So I like guys that can do both sides of the game, and I really do try and emphasise those ones. There's probably a gap in my gallery, in my philosophy for, you know, I used to have a Zacharian at Limited, and I really felt, wow, he's a really great midfielder to have, and I really wish I had him for a long while. But again, that kind of guy who's very much more one-dimensional, like Azella Ryan, who I used to have. And the captain's armband in my club is something that has to be earned, you know, for my priority teams, for my big hitting teams, which we'll get into shortly. The captain's armband for my club means something. This guy is leading the team out. I'm putting the captain's armband on him and I'm saying this guy is going to smash an 80 because that's what they need to be able to do. Yeah, for me, the captain's armband is a big deal, and it's something that I like to have. I like to have good players in my team going, yeah, that's my guy for this weekend. He's my captain's armband on him. And, you know, guys that don't have the captain's armband, like I say, is earned, you know. So this is really at the front of my mind recently because Levi Colwell took some captaincy duties at FC Barcelona over the summer, which was good fun. And yeah, just kind of really reinforced that with me. I'm seeing Memphis Depay's training videos, by the way. If you don't see these on social media, you're missing out. He is training like an NFL star coming in for this pre-season. So he's famously the most decorated captain probably in FC Barcelona history. So it could be a big season for Memphis. Captain Jota Till I Die is in Saudi Arabia. So we need to be waiting for Champions League games to get him. But yeah, the captain's armband at my club is very much earned. Now, the transfer policy part of Sorare is something that is forever changing, and you need to really assess everything in the moment. And you really need to have, you know, I find obviously with all my toys and tools and everything, I've got screens, I've got whiteboards and notepads everywhere, and obviously I can commit a lot of time to this. So I feel like the more of a bird's eye view you can have of all the pieces on the board, the better decisions you can make. And when it comes to the transfer policy at my club, or for me anyway, over the last couple of years, when it comes to buying, there's been a few things that I've always relied upon in difficult decisions. Now, I recently threw a difficult decision into a poll, into a vote for the FC Barcelona members in the Telegram group. So, I'm always open to second, third, fourth, fifth, thousand of opinions because there's so much going on. You cannot be abreast of everything. So one thing that's so undervalued when it comes to your Sorare Club is the little network of clubs that you're pals with and whatever as well. Because if you're playing this game by yourself, you are really missing out. Engaging content as much as you can. There's a very open and active community. And, it's one of those ones where, little clubs, you see them, they help each other. You see little guys, I know guys, guys. It's a great part of the game, and it really does help with the transfer policy. It helps you make, some vetting opportunities, to make sure you don't make mistakes and such. But when it comes to buying cards, particularly the higher scarcities you go, the rule of thumb for me is buy cheap, buy twice. Okay, now I like to lean into that and run away from that, depending on the situation. Now, sometimes buy cheap and buy twice could be great for a goalkeeper situation if you're expecting the two cheap goalkeepers, because they're very unpredictable to predict who's going to be playing. Once that separates, then you might be onto something. So buying cheap and buying twice could be good in a situation like that. But the situation of, I'm going to buy the guy for right under my budget so I can buy two guys for the price of one, because I'd rather do that than buy the one guy for whatever the target price is. More often than not, people regret not buying the guy. Getting the guy that isn't the cheaper option is the sensible option, is the box ticker, the guy that fits in, hits the criteria perfectly the way you've got it lined up. That is the guy to get most of the time, unless you're leaning into the whole, you do want less for less, basically. But that's what I think about in a purchase when I'm going to buy something. What type of purchase is this? Is this one that I might need to deal with again later? Because when it comes to super rare goalkeepers, that's what's been going on at my club for the last 3 years. It's been an absolute headache until, moderately recently. But then again, recently enough, it's been a headache again. Or is it, am I buying cheap and buying twice because it's a market play? I'm going to get a couple more guys in, wait for them to mature and move them on. Or I'm waiting for that, split transfer situation to happen where I now get two guys that are solid and both their prices move up. I can use both of them. I can maybe sell one to pay for the whole thing, whatever it might be. And for me, in my wallet, in my budget, I need to be buying guys when they're out of the spotlight. I know that. I need to buy guys when they're injured. I need to buy guys when they've got a risky transfer rumour perhaps, or I need to buy guys when their future is completely unknown and I'm just crossing my fingers that I believe they're going to be lined up for a decent situation. They're suspended, they're on stinking form, they've been dropped, whatever it is. I'm very aware that my top targets, the guys I really want, unless I win them, that's the only situation I'm going to be able to really buy them in. And again, that's something that's firmly in my philosophy. My philosophy isn't find the guys that are getting hot and get on them as cheap as possible and then use them for as long as possible and sell them for as high a price as possible, which is, I think, what the majority of the market feels like it does, just me personally. And I like bringing in long-term targets, guys that I know, guys that I've been watching for a while. And like I said, kind of with the previous point, I see a good entry. I see a good opportunity there to pick them up. They are injured, they're suspended, they're whatever at the moment. Brilliant. Let me get them in there now, XP them up, and then I'm ready to go for whatever the strategy might be in particular. At the moment, as I'm speaking to you about this, I'm thinking about recently bringing in Memphis Depay when he was injured at Atletico Madrid and Griezmann was going off. Morata was starting. But now Morata's away to AC Milan or Saudi Arabia. It looks like Depay's going to be back in action. Griezmann's obviously hot to trot. And so that kind of situation, my top targets, it's always going to be those kind of situations. I build into them. And guys, even if I'm going to buy a guy at the drop of a hat for a game week, for a situation, I want it to be guys that are long-term targets, guys that I know about already. It's not like I'm filtering through a bit of parameters and just, this guy will do, but let's bring him in. Like for the under-23s, to try and cover utility, or the under-21s, I brought in Manu Sanchez and Camelo. Neither of them worked out, but it doesn't matter. I've now got them for next season. Manu Sanchez will play. Camelo, let's see where he goes. But that's fine because I fully know the guys and cool, I'll just ride with them for next season and we'll see how it comes out ultimately in the wash. The extra buffer, the extra utility, the club needed it anyway. So even if I'm making a drop of the hat decision because of the guys I'm going to try and filter in to meet the situation, although it might not always be the optimal guy, even in the worst case scenario, if I'm stuck with them, I don't mind it. And I've kind of mentioned it already, but it's always, whenever I'm trying to discover what should be the next player I get, I'm always trying to look at as high on the wish list as possible, because Sorare will always give you, in my experience anyway, little opportunities to get into different players at different situations. And at the moment, I've had a real conundrum over a few different positions, and it's particularly for some of the scarcer ones. I'm thinking, Dad, just get some damaged goods in there now, which I've kind of decided to do or try and do. I just get some damaged goods in, which has a bit of a longer term view on it. That's just much safer because maybe some of the other guys I've been picking up over the last 12 months have had such a shorter horizon than potentially some of these other guys who, even though their immediate term future isn't optimal, beyond that, they're really safe to have at the team, But the best actual footballer, the best actual card, the best version of a card you can possibly get is always a thing to try and be looking for, because as the game grows and grows and grows, opportunities will always come for different game modes, and there's different iterations are always moving on with monthly leaderboards, season-long leaderboards, experiences getting given out, money, cards, all this other stuff that's going to be rafted around, and the best cards normally help win things more often than not. Now, when it comes to selling, my philosophy is always really simple. If I'm selling a guy and let's just use the history of the stats I've got. If I've ever sold a guy for over an ETH, like an ETH and a half, 2 ETH, 3 ETH, whatever it might be, I will always replace them for as much as I possibly can back in the team in some way, shape, or form. So when I sell Virgil van Dijk for an ETH and a half, which at the time was like $5,000 or something, I go and buy Guardiola and Angelino. One of them might just replace him in utility, and one of them I could maybe even sell for the money I paid for both of them and do the whole thing again. It's an ideal trade for me. Sold Taylor Harwood-Bellis for, I think, 3.5 ETH, and I brought in Jan Kuto as a replacement for him, just the one. Obviously banked a lot of creds off the back of that as well. And then other transfers as well. Like when I sold Tonali, I think I just brought Brais Mendes back into the squad. Because when you take a player on that journey from being not worth a lot to being worth a lot, you've done something right. You've identified something. And if in the marketplace, with the proceeds or whatever, you can try and recreate that. It's a very healthy thing to do for your club, if that makes sense. So whenever I'm selling somebody, particularly if it is a high value item like that, I do try and factor in what did I pay for it, and what could I do as a little seed replacement elsewhere. Like if I sell Harwood-Bellis for 3.5 ETH or whatever it was, could I get somebody for about half an ETH that could be another under 23 prospect that maybe in another season or two could be worth something similar? And the answer to that was yes, cool, I could, no problem. And maybe that's worked out, maybe it hasn't, let's see. But that kind of thing always gives you the opportunity for history to repeat itself. Another good football player that you've spotted can come good again twice. So whenever I'm selling people, I'm always mindful of any sort of replacement. Goalkeepers are good for this. If you do sell a goalkeeper that's been a backup that becomes a first-team goalkeeper, then you sell him. It makes 100% sense to take something and try and get another one again and roll in that sense. If you've been good at it successfully, if that makes sense. If you know you've got a knack for finding a guy that can move in the market well enough, then I always try and think about that when I'm selling. And one thing that I always hold very firm, particularly when I'm getting offered money, like Ethereum or dollars or pounds or whatever, and I always hold it at the very front of my head when it becomes a lot of money, when we're talking about proper sales of cards here, is don't be greedy, like this is real money, that we're spending on these cards, and real offers come in. And sometimes, I've had offers and you think, nah, I'll get way more for that tomorrow. And sometimes way more offers don't come in. So it's one of those ones where if you're really having a look at it, and you normally get that feeling that this is actually quite a lot of money for this card versus what I paid, and reality of the market and blah blah blah, money in my pocket, perhaps an opportunity for that. So don't be greedy when selling is another thing I would say. Be realistic, because actual offers versus offers you think that will come are totally different things. One thing I'll think about as well with that kind of situation when I'm selling is, do I have a path back to this card? Because I try and be quite particular with the guys I do bring in. If I'm selling them, it's normally because they are just worth so much and I can't justify keeping them anymore. It's like, wow, somebody's offering me like $4,000 for this. How can I say no? Kind of situation. Or £1,000 or 800 quid or whatever it is, depending on the card we're talking about and the time of year and whatever it might be. But sometimes it's, do I have a path back to this guy? Because if I'm going to sell like a Martin van der Voort for 2 Ethereum, I'm really gutted to see him go. I love Van der Voort. I love to have a Van der Voort card back in my gallery. But when I look at that and I sell him, I think, well, this price only goes down over time, because at some point he won't be under 23 anymore. And that will definitely reduce his price. At some point, he'll have more cards out, and that will probably reduce his price. So, and a few factors, if I wait long enough, maybe there's a path back to me for Van der Voort. Maybe I could win him as a reward as well. That's very possible. But with some cards, that's not possible. When I sold, particularly with like jersey numbers, one-offs, or high scarcity cards, sometimes when you sell them, that guy's gone. Again, to use Van der Voort as the example, the exact card I had, I'm never going to get that thing back. The 1 of 100 original season, rookie Van der Voort, I've sold that is never coming back now. If I was to sell a unique card, again, the likelihood of that coming back is like nothing. So the path back to a card is something I'll consider. It's much more likely and probably something you need to consider much less if you're the further down the scarcity tree you go, if you like. But it's something that I always think about when I'm selling a guy as well. Is there a path back to him? Because if there's not, then that does affect the price. And if, so again, that's another element that comes into it all. When I'm selling Harwood Bellis at that point in time, I'm thinking I'm never going to be able to get a Harwood Bellis if this is where he's at, because he's a quality player. And, he's also got an uncertain future. We don't know where he's going to be next year at the moment. Maybe right now is a great time to buy Harwood Bellis. I did look at the price of him about a month ago and got mildly tempted, but alas, I never pushed the... maybe I'll go and look at that again, actually. So I don't mind getting a top guy that I would love to bring back in when there's, like I mentioned earlier in the video, fits the philosophy, doesn't it? So paths back are always important to me. I always like to think about them. And premium rares are hot property. So if I get a rare popping off, and especially, I'm always going to be quite inclined to think about selling it, because rares, in terms of the ones that can get mad expensive, great. Some of them, a lot of them, hold a lot of sustainable kind of market value, depending on what the entire market is doing, of course. But a lot of money for a rare is super hard to turn down. So, like, in different stages, it depends on the price of Ethereum and whatever, but I'm always kind of looking at my rares and thinking, if they got to... thinking about Wirtz, for example, at one point, he was like 3.5 ETH, and I was like, yeah, well, at 3.5 ETH for a rare, I would have to sell him. Similar with Jota as well, but again, as their price comes down, I'm like, well, Wirtz at the moment is 0.8. I'm like, no, I wouldn't be interested in selling them at that. So for rares, as I say, when they get into that really expensive part, I'm always quite ready to sell, and I'm aware of that. And I look at rares like that and think, is this a guy that could get to that level? And I need to be prepared for that if I think the guy has that level of potential, like a Jota, like a Wirtz, maybe one or two others that are in the club coming through. And is that who I'm selling? Am I selling a guy that is just hot property? Now, hot property rares, sell them when they're going, because again, those prices, you can regret not biting on them when they come. And when it comes to selling as well, you've got to remember utility reigns supreme over sentiment. Now, the collection bonus might change that a little bit with one-offs and with jersey numbers in particular, but whenever you're talking to people, like, no one gives a crap about the guy, and it's stuff that I care about, right? If I was going to buy an Immobile, we've spoken about this before with McBride and maybe Nellis with Ronaldo's and stuff like that, but I want to buy a guy in a golden boot season kind of thing, that's normally the sort of thing I would gravitate towards, but the market doesn't give a crap about that. The market cares about if it's a midfielder or a forward. The market cares about if it's got a season bonus, if it's a number one, these kind of things. So, and again, it's remembering when you're selling that, sentiment is not valued in the market at all, unless people want it to be. And then the third and final part of the club philosophy, and this is probably the part that really helps me control, monitor, and maintain what divisions I'm playing, what kind of cards I should be looking for, what I'm missing, what I have too much of, and that's my competitive philosophy. Now, in the members portion of some of the content I mentioned, I've got 5 priority divisions for this season, and it's the main 5 of my gallery. I can make money. I can get thresholds, and I can finish places and get money off the leaderboard, not just from podiums. And good cards, of course, come with that. So when it comes to my competitive philosophy, we've got the priority divisions, okay? The main things we're going to try and compete in for the main philosophy of the club, for the cards we have today and where the strengths are now. I then want to think about, what's my project? Like, where is the club trying to move into? And for my club at the moment, where I would love to move into is I would love to try and build a club that gets into 240 in the unique division. And with the outfielders I've got, I would love to get way more competitive again in under 23 rare pro, something like that. So that's my projects. That's where I'm trying to move the club towards at the moment. And then the third kind of part of my competitive philosophy is, how am I going to build towards that? And for the 240 unique thing, it's primarily kickoff unique, which I played a little bit last season with moderate success, not winning anything. And super rare 270 could be on the table if I have enough goalkeepers available to maybe pull that off. And when it comes to good cards, under 23 prospects and just general trading collateral, the cap 270 division is something I think I've got good strength to play in. It's a project division that could give me some collateral to maybe move around the market to get other pieces in that are priority targets for me. And in terms of the project category for the competitive strength of the market, I do consider the market to be a part of that, because if you're going to go and buy cards, where does that come from? You can deposit all you want, but not many people I talk to have got bottomless wallets. So part of this game is trading. Part of this game is buying guys low, maybe trading a few of them together in a slightly better situation to try and compound that into one guy. Or, sell them off for pieces, do whatever. There's a lot of different strategies that we talk about on the channel. But I do build that into the project part of it. So I do think, could I maybe on the market, get a couple of rares into a situation where maybe I could throw them at Pavel and get a unique out of him, or one of these trader accounts, something like that. Could I sell a few guys, get a wallet together, and bid on a unique, etc.? So that's probably there for everyone, I suspect. But again, it's just identifying that you might want to use the market to make something happen, not just the leaderboard. And as I say that, it sounds blatantly obvious, but I think it's worth just connecting the dots on the video. So I've got my target set. The philosophy has been kind of revisited and revamped for the upcoming season. I feel pretty much almost locked and loaded, ready to rumble. Need to see what news happens in the transfer market. We've had some contract extensions at Celtic, which has been great. And, you know, there's a few other pieces to move around. And with some of the guys I've got, man, I'm really crossing my fingers. I could have a really big season ahead. And as the waters of Sorare kind of chop and change through the season with new developments, as I struggle to think, what is the right thing to do? Is this division still plausible? Should I still be moving my club in this direction? Is this guy too valuable? Should I go and buy a guy like this? Whatever. All the things I've kind of laid out in this video is the sort of things I'll be referring to in the thought processes that will help me kind of make consistent actions, consistent results. I hope you enjoyed this one, guys. On screen there now is some other stuff that I've made that YouTube thinks you might enjoy. Please do not forget to subscribe to the channel. We're trying to get to 10,000 subscribers by the start of the new season. I'll catch you on the next one. Take care. Bye-bye.